40 years ago, I made a commitment to myself that I would tell my secret publicly if the need ever arose and if I thought that it could make a difference. My name is Lavon, and I'm a 76-year-old white woman who got pregnant at the age of 16 in 1962 when abortion was illegal. I didn't want to have a baby, but I didn't want to tell my mother because she was a very abusive woman and didn't need much excuse at all to beat her children. And this time I had so severely disobeyed that I thought she just might kill me this time. So I struggled with it for a while, did things like trying to throw myself down the stairs, punch myself in the stomach. There was an old wives' tale that if you sat on a can of paint for 2 hours, that would abort the baby. I tried that. It didn't work. Uh, when I was 4 months along, I began to show, and I had to tell my mother. I felt at this point I had no choice. I asked my sister and a friend of mine to come with me because I thought that she wouldn't beat me in front of them and I would be a little bit safer. So we approached her. She slapped my face, called me a whore and a slut and a pig, and asked if the father was Tom or Dick or Harry, Joe, Pete, Mike, Kim, whoever, insinuating that I was loose and promiscuous. And she explained that she didn't know what to do, that she would need a couple of days to think about it, and then she would get back to me. And a couple of days later, she approached me, and her first comment was, "How could you do this to me after all I've done for you?" And she explained that abortion was illegal, so I couldn't get an abortion. She couldn't ask her friends if they knew anybody who could give me an abortion because then her friends would know what a whore I was. I couldn't go to a home for unwed mothers because she couldn't afford that. And I couldn't carry the baby to term because we lived in the housing projects. And then everybody in the housing projects would know what a whore I am. And that would reflect on her and cause her to live a shameful life for the rest of her life. So she explained that she had no choice but to perform the abortion on me herself. And she was a waitress. She had no nursing experience, or I don't know if she knew what she was doing, but I didn't ask questions because that's not the way it was. I would never question my mother about anything. I would just do what I was told. She had to be in control. She worked nights and she would get off work at about midnight and wake me up. And it didn't matter if it was a school night or any other night. She would begin by filling the bathtub with scalding hot water and tell me that I had to get in very quickly, otherwise, I wouldn't get in because it was too hot. But she wanted my body to go into shock, thinking that the shock of the scalding water would cause me to have an abortion. After the tub, uh, we went into my bedroom and I laid down and she told me to spread my legs. I did that. She had her surgical tools ready, which was a knitting needle, a crochet hook, and a broomstick. She would insert the broomstick into my anus and push it down and explained that she was trying to push my uterus into a position so that the crochet hook would have an easier time poking a hole and tearing my uterus so that the baby would abort. And she would try different things over the next 2 weeks. Sometimes I knew it was going to happen that time, that night. Sometimes I didn't know. And after 2 weeks, there was not an abortion. And she said that she had helped me all I could. She'd done everything for me that she could. And now I was on my own. And I was going to have to find a way to deal with it in whatever way I could. The next night, the next day, she went to work. And a couple of hours after she had left for work, I could feel the stomach cramps and felt like the baby was trying to come. I didn't call it a baby. I didn't call it anything, but I went and sat on the toilet. And I think I was on the toilet for about 2 hours. And the baby aborted. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried at the loss of a baby that could have been, and at my shame. The shame was overwhelming. I didn't feel like I was ashamed. I felt like I was shamed. I was the total, I was totally shamed. And I looked in the toilet, and the baby was complete, but it was only about as big as poop. I knew I had to flush. I didn't want to flush because that seemed to make the whole thing so real. But I flushed and I cried. I think I cried for days. Um, at the time that she was performing her techniques, she never asked how far along I was. She didn't ask me how I felt about what was happening. She didn't ask me what I wanted or what I needed. None of those things were important to her. The only thing important was how it was going to reflect on her, because when a young girl got pregnant in those days, it shamed the whole family, all the brothers, all the sisters, the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents. Everybody had to live in shame. And so I went to bed, and for the next couple of nights, uh, I was sort of tortured in my head. But on the second night, I woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't move anything from below my neck. I was paralyzed. And I tried and tried and tried, but I couldn't move. So I yelled out for my sister, who shared the room with me, and she woke up and then went in the other room and got my brother. So they were 17 and 15 at the time, something like that. They managed to get me out of the bed and stand me on my feet, but I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. And in the midst of that, my mother came home from work. My brother or my sister had called an ambulance. So the ambulance came at about the same time she arrived. And she got in the ambulance with me. She whispered in my ear and said, "You can't tell anybody that I did this to you because they'll put me in jail. And then your brother and your sisters won't have a mother. You have to say that you did this to yourself." So we got to the hospital. The doctor examined me and asked me how I got butchered this way. And I told him that I did it to myself. And he rolled his eyes as if he knew that I was telling a lie, but he let it go, except that he did tell me that I would probably never have children again in my life for what I had done to myself. Much later in my life, I realized that he had lied to me, and I did have children. But I was in the hospital, I don't remember how long, maybe for 2 or 3 days. I think that I was diagnosed with blood poisoning, but I'm not sure, and I don't know if I can get my records and find that out. But uh, I could have been killed. I could have died, and I kept the secret for 20 years. I never spoke of it to anybody or told anybody about it. And but I thought about it a lot, and it seemed like the secret was making me sick. Not physically sick, but mentally sick. Keeping the secret and holding on to that amount of shame for so many years. I was in a meeting one day when another woman was the speaker of the meeting, and she shared that she had had an abortion the day before. And abortion was legal at that time, but her shame and guilt seemed as massive as mine. And I felt like if I shared my story, that it would help her. There were at least 8 other women in the meeting that day, and as I shared my story, and then it went around the room and other people shared their stories, every woman in that room had had some traumatic experience with abortion. And it was like the floodgates had opened for me as I began to relieve myself of this secret and help myself reduce the amount of shame that I had carried for all those years. And then lately, this draft from the Supreme Court comes up, and I could see that they were taking my mother's place because they wanted to make abortion illegal. They didn't seem to care how far along a woman was, or what she felt, or what she thought, or what she needed, or what she wanted. The only thing important was that they maintained control. And then I began to see a pattern over the last several years of this abortion thing was suppressing women, but I already saw the attempts to suppress people of color, Black people, Hispanic people, uh, and coupling that with the massive amount of money that is given to any candidate who will go along with the illegal abortion issue. The money was coming from these religions that wanted it overturned because they decided it was a moral issue. I was not raised in a religion. My mother and my father were not religious. I was not baptized. I don't believe in religion. I believe in God, but the God I believe in is not the same as a Christian God or what the Bible preaches. So it seemed apparent to me that the purpose of the Supreme Court was the same as my mother's. They wanted to be in control. They wanted to be able to have everybody obey what they wanted, when they wanted, and how they wanted it. So the reason I'm making this video is to help other women and or girls know that I wouldn't say anything about the abortion specifically because it's not the abortion that made me so emotionally sick. It was the shame. And if abortion is made illegal again, these kinds of horrific stories will happen. And some of us will die. And some of us will be crazy.